Welcome back. We're talking today about technology and spirituality, different ways that people are reaching out to God through the internet and the magic of technology. And joining us tonight is Msgr Sean Ogle, the pastor of Our Lady of Mount Carmel Parish in Astoria, Queens, and an avid Facebook and Twitter user. Well, well, maybe we'll have to get more avid to keep up with all of this stuff. Right. I have to ask you, and this is a funny story, well, I guess not funny, but it certainly isn't a story I was familiar with, the patron saint of television. Who is the patron saint of television?
St. Clare of Assisi.
Now, St. Clare of Assisi was alive long before television.
Oh yeah, in the 1200s. Yes, she was a contemporary of St. Francis of Assisi, and she founded the Franciscan nuns as he founded the Franciscan brothers and priests.
Did she have a vision of one day inventing a television? No,
not that specific. She's the patron saint of wireless visual communication. She was She was a great mystic, and she spent many, many hours in prayer in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament in the church there. And toward the end of her life, when she became too ill to really go down to the church, she had such a great desire to be present as the sisters were in the chapel praying before the Lord in the Blessed Sacrament, that the Lord granted her a mystical vision of what was actually happening in the chapel at that time. And the nuns would come up and tell her what was said in the chapel that day, and what the readings had been, and what the sermon was, right. And she'd tell them exactly everything that happened.
So she was able to kind of see.
Yes, that's a privilege that's given to some saints who are very close to God. But because of that experience, when television came along,
so that's why the wireless technology.
There you go.
So they were downstairs, and yet she could still.
Yes.
Like Wi-Fi.
Yeah, the church is very good at retrofitting saints to their needs.
Yes, because I would think we need some present-day person to be the patron saint of television. But I'm not going to take it away from St. Clare.
Yeah, well.
That's a fabulous vision she had.
Yes.
Of course, if I were St. Clare, I wouldn't have told them that I could hear everything that was going on in the chapel.
But she was a saint.
Well, that's
so
true.
They weren't afraid.
And I'm certainly not a saint. So now we were talking about how much has changed. Yeah. Well, certainly since the time of St. Clare.
Yeah.
But even more recently.
Right.
And there was a photo that I had seen online. This is when our latest Pope Francis was just brought out onto the balcony for the first time in the crowds. And just 8 years prior, when Pope Benedict, same millions of people at night, and the difference between the crowds and the crowds now all holding the cell phones.
Yes. Well, that's a very vivid illustration of how fast this technology has spread and caught on. It's a tribute to the people who have invented it and marketed it, of course. But it also says something about the hunger of people to have this kind of experience.
Right, and to record the moment.
Yeah.
Which I think has some negative points too. I mean, I've been at dance recitals that I'm not convinced the parents are actually watching the dance recital.
Right.
They're so busy recording it. And this person here with the iPad is my biggest pet peeve in the world, is people who basically hold up a brick while you're at a concert.
Yeah. And of course that is the downside to any technology in every generation, is that it puts an impediment between you and the experience.
Right.
So that can be true of almost anything in the history of technology. And you want to be able to be the master of technology. You don't want to let it be your master.
Well, that's true.
So, and this is a challenge in every age. When I was a child, there was a great concern among parents about children watching too much television. That it would ruin your eyesight, that it would make you less playful to go outside, it would make you less communicative, and so forth and so on. And some of those things were exaggerated, but the prudent parent, in fact, would limit that availability, because there is some truth, like all exaggerations, there's always a kernel of truth. And the same is true, I think, today.
I mean, the fact is, I hope, and as much as I know these people wanted to record the moment, but I hope that they were in the moment.
Yeah.
I mean, what an exciting moment that they were having there. I hope that they weren't so busy trying to get the focus right that they missed it.
Right. One of the great lessons I learned from my mother, when I would go on trips or something, and I would take real film with film in the camera.
Oh, the
that
ones
kind
that
of
you put in the
photograph.
envelope
Yes,
and mail
yes.
off. Yes.
And I would take pictures of things that looked very attractive to me. And when they would come home, and when we'd get them developed, my mother said, "But there's nobody in that we know. It's a tree. It's a rock, you know." And it taught me that these pictures ought to reflect something about the experience you had, not just a picture you could buy from Hallmark or,
Well,
in,
that's true.
or in the store. So, I mean, you know, balance. And the same thing is true with internet technology, balancing what's a great tool, but don't let it become a substitute for actually living.
Well, that's true. Now, we were talking about personal spirituality, like different ways people can, you know, make connections. But what about evangelization? Trying to get other people to hear about whatever your religious belief is, sharing things.
Sure.
Is that being enhanced with this technology?
Oh, definitely. And I would make a very, very evident comparison. I have performed a number of weddings now for people who have met over the internet.
Really?
Yes, a number
You
of
could
them.
be an ad for eHarmony here.
Well, you know, some of them met, I think there were one or two from eHarmony. There are apparently many of these dating sites, and there are some of them that are specifically for Catholics or Jews or Protestants.
Right,
you know,
I've heard
and
of
some
those,
of them are
sure.
more generic, you know. And I think what it does, the great thing is, it enables people who have something in common to find each other in a way that might not always be possible otherwise.
Right.
The same thing is true of evangelization or of spreading the message of faith. The access, the immediate access over great distances with a lot of rather, you know, detailed information is an asset, but I think it's only a first step. People still then have to take the step of going inward. It's one thing to go outward across 7 continents and the wireless universe. It's another thing to interiorize that and say, okay, what does this actually mean in my life? And that's where conversion in the religious sense would happen. And that has to happen.
And it's one of those things that I think the technology is so much fun that we have to step away and make time.
Yeah, as you said before, you want to be in the moment as well as as recording the moment. So, I mean, like many things in life, it's a question of learning to use a tool rather than have it use you, whatever the tool might be.
But when it comes to more information, like your couples, they are able to meet people who, although I have to laugh, you're describing this to me and how people can meet people who are suitable, perhaps the same religious background. Isn't it funny how years ago you would have been in an arranged marriage because someone would have been selected who was of the same cultural and religious background, and then we moved away from that. No, we're going to pick our own spouse, and now we're letting the computer pick for us.
Well,
it's almost like we're going full circle here.
Yeah. It's always a danger. It's something to watch out for. Yeah.
Well, we're going to hope that all those couples that you married, you know, whether they were arranged by a matchmaker or arranged by eHarmony 20 years later.
Right. Well, we pray for that all the time.
We do.
Yeah.
But in another sense, not just couples meeting each other, we have all sorts of religious orders that have websites. And I always think, what a fabulous idea, because exposure. You know, we do have a vocation issue with not as many young people or middle-aged people making religious vocations, and I think a lot of it is because they don't get to see see it in action. Now they get to be on the computer and see it in action.
Yeah, no, that's true. It's a great, there is so much good that is done by religious groups, religious orders of men, religious orders of women, Catholic dioceses, Catholic parishes, other religious groups that do wonderful things in the service of humanity and for the glory of God. Well, unless in the past, unless you subscribe to a magazine, which you might or might not have seen, you might not ever know about that. With this access, it's much more possible for people to learn about all these good things that are done. And that's bound to have a good effect. When you know about it, then you want to, you become intrigued by it, and the next thing would be to say, well, what motivated these people to do that?
Right.
You know, and maybe to read more deeply, and maybe to go for an experience of doing something similar yourself. That's the importance of a parish, particularly, or a congregation, of being able to put its message out there, and to be found, to be visible, and to show what it has done, and also to invite people to join in what they intend to do. We have a lot of young adults moving into my part of Queens, where I'm pastor, and many of them are not from New York at all, and many of them want to find the church where they can worship, and they'll find us first on the internet before they ever lay eyes on the building.
Absolutely.
So you have to have a presence there.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I'm going to go through some of the websites when I asked you for some of your favorites. And of course, when I think of religious websites, I think of the Vatican.
Right.
But I didn't realize that there was the other Vatican website. See, I didn't know that. I thought it was just this very, hands-off kind of website.
This is the documentary website.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. This is where they file everything you always wanted to know about what the Pope said, did for the last 20 years.
What do you have for breakfast?
Plus photo galleries. And they do have a link here. Actually, a visual tour of the Sistine Chapel is one of the links on this, which is actually very beautiful and interesting.
It did look a little intimidating, though, when I landed here. Yeah. So I was glad that you told me about the other Vatican website. Here we go. And it must be official, because it says it's official.
Well, it is. No, they produced this one in order to make the information more accessible. So you see, it's this is kind of the Sports Illustrated version of the other one.
I like the Sports Illustrated version. And what I didn't realize, now, I had here on my iPad, I had the Pope app. And the Pope app is also put out by this same Vatican. So the Pope app, which is telling all these same things, it's the same official Vatican website.
Interesting.
So we can find out all the news, we can find out what's going on.
Right.
All good stuff. So you might want to find out, what was this one? News.va.
Right.
As opposed to Vatican.va. That was our intimidating one.
Right.
Okay. Some other ones I had here. Now, this one you showed me, Patheos. This wasn't just Catholic. This had all sorts of different faith traditions under the faith channels.
So they give you a lot. It's a lot of feature articles, in-depth analysis. It's not just the news headlines. It's issues, and they do have a range of all religious traditions here, including atheists and pagans listed. So they cover quite a bit of different elements pertaining to the interior life of people, you might say, I guess.
Okay. Well, it covers everybody, which is nice. And they have different blogs and columns and all sorts of...
Yeah, this seems to be like an all-purpose kind of it's really a magazine type website, really.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what is this one over here?
BeliefNet is not, it's similar to Patheos. It's also a kind of a magazine. They have a lot of advertising on it, as many websites do. I see that here. Let me
move it up so we're not so much with the ads.
This finds a lot of human interest stories, a lot of stories about people's life experience. I guess you might say people as they live out their faith at different elements of their life, old age, youth, the faith-filled journey of a rock star, things like that. So they're trying to illustrate the place of faith in the lives of a lot of different people.
Terrific. Well, I'd like you to go searching on the web and see what you find with technology and spirituality.